Hello, everyone, and it's MSEM set submission season, so you know what's up. Uh, we're me, Dodger, Pipsqueak. We're back to review the custom set Alkabah, one of the two sets that got into MSEM this season, and we're going to be looking over some of its most exciting cards for constructed.
Do you know if that's the correct accenting? Because I always pronounce it in my head Alkabah.
I don't know actually.
Um,
I feel like this has definitely been discussed somewhere, but yeah, it's
okay.
definitely weird because all of the communication for like this type of process is through text for the most part, right? So this is like the
Well, I
first
guess we can each pronounce it our own ways, and then Zangy can flame whoever got it wrong.
true, which that's a good way to transition. This set is designed by Zangi. It's inspired by generally like Persian culture and aesthetics, and uh, has a lot of themes of duality and kind of, yeah, duality in many forms. There's the DFC angel demons that are kind of like the big mythic creatures for the set. There's also stuff like Monument, which shows important characters or important events in the set and then how they kind of leave a legacy. Um, so, yeah, flavor wise, there's a lot of cool things going on. And mechanically, it's actually very multicolored focus since it's almost a four color faction set. So we're going to be seeing some of that as we go on.
I think that's basically the set's core premise, right? At least
Yeah,
mechanically.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because like if you were to play the set on like a limited level, I don't think that you're not like because I think usually in like a faction set, you're usually expected to draft one of the factions. Whereas here, you can very easily draft like a two or three color deck, and four color is kind of just like a stretch goal because of all the fixing, which I think is an interesting way. Whereas I think in constructed, lots of the four color cards are kind of like pushed to encourage that four color deck, which is an interesting way of structuring the factions. But yeah, there's definitely like a four like a very least multicolored, and definitely like a four color faction structure there because
hmm
of like the commands and
Um,
the flip demon angels. Yeah.
One thing I would say is, well, I have two things to add. One, the limited environment, from my experience building the sealed pools, you actually end up going four color rather than five, like a fair amount of the time, which I thought was pretty cool and seemed pretty hard to pull off. And it kind of does this by um, having mechanical through lines in various shards, and then you often will supplement that by splashing your fourth color. But you can also, of course, build five color. There's nothing inherently bad about that, and you can build two color as well. But in general, yeah, it's a very cool limited format. And then flavor wise, if you're curious to learn more about the flavor of this set, it's a top down set based on the Shahnameh, which is kind of like Persian culture's version of the Odyssey. So it's kind of a book full of but it doesn't focus on one hero. It's kind of focused on a lot of different stories, and that's kind of what the main source material is for this set. Anyway, that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah. TLDR, set flavor good, set mechanics good. So definitely check it out outside of the context of the format in this review, um, because it still very much slaps even outside of this very cool constructed context, which we're going to be discussing today. But yeah, with that, I think we can get into our first card of the list, which is going to be Zareen, the Second Shah. So Zareen is pretty cool. Um, it's on the front side. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for a creature card with mana value two or less, or a planeswalker card. Reveal it, then put it into your hand, then shuffle. And the backside is essentially just like a static. All of your creatures enter with the +1/+1 counter. All of your planeswalkers enter with an extra loyalty counter. I think that the front side is really what's kind of like the backside is not bad at all, but like for me, the front side is very compelling here. Is like a kind of like mid-range toolbox with a good stat line.
Mm-hmm. Uh, of note here, I don't know if you're using the image from the current Planesculptors, but this card is actually we're going to nerf it before it's released. Um, we on the council thought that 2/3 was too strong a stat line for an Imperial Recruiter. So we were putting it at 2/2. You can still like justify this by saying like Imperial Recruiter getting a creature with like power 2 or less is better than mana value 2 or less because like you can get more expensive ETB creatures. But still, this card is very strong. Like very reasonable body for a tutor that replaces itself, and it has a flashback. So when the creature trades off, you can still get additional value if you have the mana to spare.
Yeah, they're
Very,
like
very good card for mid-range decks, pod decks, etc.
yeah, there's a cycle
Yeah,
of monocolored Shahs, and I would argue that this is either the best or second best of them. It's just really good.
I vote the best personally, but I could see some people disagreeing with me.
I think it's really just an argument between this and the red one, which we'll get to. I suspect this is better, but
Hmm.
the other thing I want to note about this card, which I missed on the first like 1 or 2 times I read it, is the Planeswalker doesn't need to be mana value 2 or less.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's a big deal because we only have like one target that would be hit by that, maybe two.
We have like 6. It's actually kind of ridiculous, but
Oh,
most of them are
right.
bad.
I was just thinking Hemley and Edith, but I forgot about the one Ayashi or whatever.
We have Ayashi. We also have Alexa and Artie.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We have a shocking
funny.
number of CMC 2 or less Planeswalkers, but putting that aside, so Zareen can either get you like, one of your like mid-rangey tools. We have a couple of Flicker Dorks at less than 2 CMC or 2 or less CMC, so you can kind of do the recruiter chain for value stuff that you can
Oh,
do like
you can chain this with like Aethermancer's Familiar or Orichi, right?
Shawl Binder is the other one that comes
Shellbinder.
to.
Or like Rilken.
Imagine if we still had
I guess
Desert Scroll.
Rilken returns at the beginning of end step, right? So not the same.
Yeah, and you have to sacrifice the Rilken, so you're not really netting value off that one. But so you can do some value stuff there, but the fact that it can either find like it can find a hate bear, it can find some like little dorks, or it can just like fetch up your like go over the top planeswalker, whether that's like a Johnny Resolute or something else. Like
Hmm.
this card is so much value, and I think it needs to be because it's actually competing with Sign of Fecundity, which is another very powerful card
Hmm.
that similarly also has a flashback mode.
Yeah, I think one thing that I can imagine being really filthy with this is just like fetching up something like a cower. I specifically say that because like it's like cower is just kind of like it's like a big game ending planeswalker, but also one that is like can be relatively cheap depending on the game state. So you can kind of just like there can be turns where you just like fetch up a cow, play this, fetch up cower, immediately play cower, and then go ham. Um, but yeah, that's just like one line. There's lots of crazy stuff you can do with this by design.
Yeah. Should we go to our next card?
Sounds good.
Yeah, hit us.
All right. So the next card is Change of Station. It is a 1 mana white instant. Exile target creature. So very good for 1 mana. However, the drawback is that creature's controller creates a 1/1 white soldier token, then judges that token. And judge is a keyword action where you can either honor the creature by putting a +1/+1 counter on it, or condemn it by sacrificing it to draw a card. So this is kind of like a Swords to Plowshares variant that gives your opponent a choice on what kind of benefit they receive in exchange.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, given that we have out of body experience in the format, where does this end up?
Right. Yeah. I think for me, out of body experience has always felt kind of bad in aggro decks because I think giving your opponent a free blocker is not great. It's very, very good in control decks where they don't really care about having blocker like trying to block anyway, and they can just like have that 1/1 get caught up in their sweeper or whatever. So maybe this is an aggro card because your opponent drawing a card isn't like that scary, but also it's like a 2/2, so that's a better blocker than a 1/1 flyer. So honestly, I'm not sure.
One of the places where people were excited about this card, which I think is kind of niche but noteworthy, is flyers in particular, where blue-white
Mhm.
flyers out of body is kind of the best removal spell they can get, but giving your opponent a flying blocker is annoying, whereas giving your opponent a 2/2 ground-based blocker, you really don't care about that.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, that's
I
true.
think this is definitely worse than out of body in control decks because your opponent being able to turn your removal spell into a, 2-for-1 is like the nightmare in control decks.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's a chance this card is going to suffer from new card syndrome for a little bit, where people are going to be like, "Oh, I want to playtest the new card. Maybe this is better than the card I was already running, and they're going to run it even if in practice it actually isn't. But I mean, tech options are good, and there are noticeable differences between this and out of body. So, you know, maybe we'll see it happen.
You can also cast this on your own creature, and it doesn't feel like the worst thing ever in response to a removal spell. Like, say you really want to keep power on the board, you can just turn your creature into a 2/2 due to like the reality shift mode, or you can like dig a little deeper if you really need an extra card. So nice bit of flexibility, but overall, yeah, I don't really see this competing too much with out of body experience.
Okay, yeah. And speaking of probably not competing, but we're still going to
Right.
discuss it. Do you want to take this away, Pip?
Yeah, so this is one of the sets of 3 or 4 walkers. Meryl the Thieving Blade, for 2 blue, 4 loyalty planeswalker. This is not Chase the Mind Sculptor. So her whole shtick is she's a rogue, she steals things. +1 lets you steal the top card of your opponent's library, but also you can only cast it until end of turn. Her -3 is a bounce/mind control, and her -7 is a hard mind control. Um, I don't think this card's good. I think this card doesn't have relevant modes when you play her, unless you put her down to 1 loyalty to bounce something, which is kind of a really rough sell for me.
Hey,
Um,
that's only one more loyalty than, or one less loyalty than Jace does.
it's true.
Uh, Except
Basically,
Jace can do it again.
uh, twice. Um,
Yeah, I think that this card is actually very good if you resolve it and untap with it. And it does go up to 5 loyalty, which is not a not a small number, but I kind of get the feeling that in the current meta, it's like you're not really very often going to be in a position where you can tap out for this and then untap with it and then like do your thing. Um,
yeah, I also
that's kind of
think
my
that,
impression.
like, also if you think about it, like, 30% of the time you're going to miss on that uptick, since your opponent might just like exile a land.
That's
And
true. Yeah.
you can't play lands off it, you can only cast things. Um, and if it's a really expensive card or it's a reactive card that's not relevant, like the plus is not drawing you a card each time. So I think this card's strength is going to really depend on how good the -3 steal a thing is.
Hmm.
But for that to be good, your opponent needs to have a creature on board. Meryl needs to have at least 4 loyalty, because if you -3 her, and she dies, you then don't get the color fixing of her passive. Um, and if your opponent is in that like, it's very hard to imagine a circumstance where all of those things are true. Like, you have the mana, you have the loyalty, and your opponent has a creature, because if your opponent had the creature, they would have just killed her or knocked her down to a low enough loyalty. So I think this card has no real place in MSEM, but we talk about planeswalkers, so here we are.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame because I think MSEM still is missing like a very good
Yeah.
blue planeswalker. Like all of our blue planeswalkers are kind of trash, to be honest. um, so hopefully we'll get one day. But I
One
mean, I
day.
think this card's design is cool and seems
I
fun and
agree.
limited.
Yeah, I think that this set does like a really good job of like balancing itself for a hypothetical standard environment and also just having some really powerful designs in some slots. So, yeah, I think Melee is definitely one that falls short of our format. Maybe we'll find a home elsewhere.
Hmm.
Next up is a card which definitely has a home, at least in one deck. Um, it's going to be Nizev Enforcer. So for 1 blue, you get a 1/2 with prowess, fine rate. The strong part of this is, at the beginning of your end step, if its power is 4 or greater, you create a token that's a copy of it. And yeah, that stacks. The token copies have that ability. So if you have some way to like repeatedly prowess pump this, you can find yourself with an exponential army on your hand.
I do think there's something a little bit deceptive about that, because part of the truth is, if you end the turn with 2 of these guys at power 4 or greater, after you already ended the turn with one of them at power 4 or greater, your opponent's most likely dead. Like, they have taken 12-ish damage by that point. You don't need 2 more dudes. Um, but I think this card is good. I think it's awkwardly not very good if you're pumping it with prowess the traditional way. Like, I don't think this is good with like burn spells and cantrips. I think with this, because casting 3 spells is a bit of a tall ask, I think with this you really want to be like untapping and casting Brute Strength or similar cards.
Mhm.
I can see this like with sword and board is one thing that I was
Or
thinking of.
you can always just like put counters on this or equip it. That also
True.
works. Yeah, I mean, I do like the pump spells aspect. What I think is cool about this card is oftentimes like when you're playing a tempo deck, and you want to pressure your opponent, you might want to play multiple threats. But then if your opponent has sweepers, then like you could get blown out, right? So I always really like threats for both aggro and tempo that let you continue to develop your board presence without spending more cards. And like if you're just casting cantrips and like beating them up with your boy, and then you get another one, it's like now your opponent has to do something about both of those cards, and you can just sit back and not play any of the other threats. And we all know that like 1/2 prowess is like already a very playable stat line because like Soulscar Mage is a strong card in modern. Mostly because in modern there's more support for prowess decks, but as in like they have stuff like Manamorphose and Lava Dart. But I mean, I still we have comparable cards, and I think that prowess is definitely a pretty underexplored archetype in MSEM. So I think this card definitely has a lot of potential.
Okay. Next up, let's head over to Mindscape Denial. So you want to introduce this one?
Yeah, this card's interesting because people have made some really bad evaluations of it. So
my favorite conversation by far was where people were arguing whether it was a strictly better remand or a strictly worse remand.
that was a very pleasant conversation. Exile Strike spell, the card's owner can choose to return it to their hand if they do draw a card. So, as far as the remand comparison goes, it is a remand if your opponent wants to cast the spell again. Otherwise, it is 2 mana for a hard counter on that spell. Which is probably pretty good. One of the awkward things is the Teamer Tempo deck in this format right now doesn't want this card. So like the first place you would look for remand, i.e. in like a classic tempo deck, you have to like kind of put this card off to the side.
Tempo
There's
decks are usually the remand players. I feel like control decks are the main remand people, right?
So I feel like hard control typically has wanted to go mana leak in the past. The place where we see remand is like in tempo decks and in combo control decks like Twin or the Velomachus Turns deck.
I agree with combo control, but I feel like remand is just a really bad card for tempo.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe that's I don't know. That's just it's hard to say. I like so to clarify my position on how this compares to remand. The argument that this is a strictly better remand is basically someone saying, okay, your opponent could make the mistake and make this a counterspell, quote unquote, like quote unquote around mistake, and counterspell is a better card than remand. That's basically the argument, right? But the problem is that there are times where you actually would rather cast remand and counterspell in case you need an extra card and your opponent doesn't actually care that much about the spell that got countered, right? So in that, like this is actually going to be pretty similar to remand most of the time, but it does give your opponent like a small amount of counterplay to say like, hey, I don't care about that spell as much as like you not getting extra cards, so I'm going to not take it back. So it is a strictly worse remand.
I think one of the places, so the card most comparable to this in MSEM right now is the card Redo from 0, which is blue, counter target spell unless its controller pays its mana cost again, which is very similar to Remand in that in the late game, your opponent can just cast the spell again, but in the early game, it just counters the thing. There are decks that have played Redo in the past, but have really hurt their mana to do so. We've seen like a couple Jeskai and Esper decks try that. The fact that this only has 1 color density is, I think, probably the biggest selling point of it. Is this is a fairly powerful counterspell if you're looking to go into the mid game and you can't support double blue. I think if you're an early game focused deck, you'd rather be on some combination of Cosmic Sinkhole and Portal Fracture. And if you're a heavily late game focused deck, you probably want more unconditional things like Cursory Glance. Or not unconditional thing. Cursory Glance is the definition of conditional. But like hard counters that say
Yeah.
nope, you can't just immediately replay this. Um,
Okay,
but
I gotta say I was actually pretty low on this card, but I think you've sold me. I think it definitely has a place.
I think like maybe Bant Flash would be one of the places I would start looking for this card.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Because I think the issue with Remand is always like, you kind of can't afford to tap out early in the game because one of the best ways to use Remand is just like it's kind of each player time walks, but you can't
Yeah.
trip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's like what makes it good on turn two because it's always like the maybe next turn kind of card, you know, when you intend to counter their spell anyway. So in that regard, I think like the drawback this has is actually fairly negligible, and I think that like overall, yeah, this card probably fulfills a similar role.
I will also note that this card does line up better into uncounterable threats than Remand. Remand is a counter, and
Mm-hmm.
then if you do put it back to their hand, this exiles the spell and then lets them bounce it.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty negligible. We don't have that many uncounterable things running around MSEM, but when you encounter those things, having something that like makes you not die to it is gonna feel pretty good.
yeah,
Um,
definitely kind of niche, but overall, cool design, better than I thought.
let's go into the next card, which is either the second or third best blue X counterspell, um,
Woo!
which
I
is
love this card.
Condescend, a mono Bluetron classic. X blue controls
Hell yeah,
unless its controller pays X. Scry 2. Scry 2 is so good, guys. That
hell yeah.
um the main issue with this card is it's competing with Cosmic Sinkhole in the early game and Pierce the Storm in the late game. I think
I wouldn't say this card is at all like Cosmic Sinkhole,
I I guess that's fair. I'm just saying
but
X.
Here's the Storm is fair.
I think Pierce the Storm is a really good card. It lines up a little bit awkwardly into the format right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I think if you are playing, once again, if you're playing something more akin to combo control, if your cards are more individually powerful than your opponent's cards, be on Condescend. Because,
Hmm.
I mean, I've seen Mono Blue Tron players cast Condescend X equals 0 just for the Scribe 2. Um, I've also seen that counter a spell. But
How?
the, they
Did they
played
choose to have it countered?
the opponent saw that they played a counterspell and moved their card to the graveyard.
Oh, that hurts.
Um,
Oh,
but
that
yeah,
hurts so bad.
so hopefully that won't be happening very much in MSEM. But I think Condescend is one of those cards that like I think I'm realistically going to forget we have it, and then in like 6 or 7 months I'm going to be building into it and go, oh huh, Condescend, that fits perfectly in this deck.
Yeah, it also just like what makes it so good in Tron is because you have so much excess mana,
Mhm.
so like you can afford the fact that it's a little mana hungry. So I think like ramp decks in particular should keep their mind on this because like it's a lot of value if you can guarantee that it's actually countering stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Kai, you want to talk about the next card?
Sure, let's get to it. It's going to be our only mono black card on this list. These monocolors are going to be racing through quickly compared to most
Yeah.
episodes where it takes us 2 hours in to get to green. So this is Assault of the Conscripted, instant. Recruit X times, you lose X life. Now, recruit is a mechanic that we're probably not going to be seeing a lot of throughout this because it's mostly good
There's like one or two other ones.
Yeah, the main thing is it's
Yeah.
good in density, and the reason for that is when you recruit, you create a 0/0 white soldier army creature token, then put a +1/+1 counter on each army you control. And then, so this is straight recruit X times, you lose X life. I think obviously people have been like talking about this as like Children of the Clouds-esque, but there's also like, it's kind of different. Children of the Clouds lets you stabilize and gives you like an evasive board to kill with. This one, while it is worse in situations where you want to stabilize, if you do this for like X equals 6, you can just untap with 21 power and just dome them. It's also a lot better if you're running it in decks with, like if you're, like I know like Jeskai, one of the tension problems that used to exist is that you were running Children of the Clouds, but you're also a Shaldra's Rage deck, and how do you reconcile that? This, if you're in a similar situation with like say Violent Collapse or something, you can definitely have some tokens outgrow that. So you can do this, untap, attack, and then still wipe, and then not lose your own board in exchange. But yeah, I feel like this is definitely something that Pip or someone Pip I definitely feel like the type of person who's more qualified to talk about this. So I'm gonna take a backseat on my first impressions.
I I think this card is like also interesting because Children of the Clouds isn't actually that good in small numbers. Like it's very good from the perspective of making you not die, but Children's Clouds X equals 2 or 3 is not actually a valid win condition. It's a very good not lose condition, but it's not a good win condition. X equals 2 on this is 3/3 worth of stats, and X equals 3 is 6/6 worth of stats, which is 5 mana for a flash 6/6 kills people pretty quickly. Um, so I think this card kind of plays small ball better than Children for killing people, and I think it also plays larger numbers much better for Children in terms of killing people. Like if you cast Children of Clouds X equals like 8-ish, you're killing your opponent in 2 or 3 turns. X equals 8, you untap and kill them on the spot. I think through 2 blockers, if I remember the math correctly, they're just dead. So I think this card has a place. The main thing that's awkward is Children has the extra flexibility of gaining life and chump blocking. Mastery of the Veil, you can sometimes like shred your opponent's hand. It also kills people from higher life totals um, for comparable cost, but they don't have counterplay in the form of blocking or whatever. Um, but
Okay, I'll be the Debbie Downer.
Mhm.
I don't think this card's playable.
Really,
I think the issue with when you're comparing this to Children of the Clouds is you're comparing values of X where you should be comparing amount of mana spent. So if you like when you're talking about Children of the Clouds for like X equals 2, like this has X equals 1 for that same amount of mana. So it's a 3 mana 1/1. Um,
sure.
at higher mana values, this not having evasion plus costing 1 more than Children to get the same number of creatures, I think is a big deal. Plus you lose X life. So like when I'm using my big like token instant win condition spell, I want it to A, give me as many bodies as possible. B, I care a lot about the evasion, and C, like you just can't cast this if you're being pressured, and you're like, let's say you're playing against like any reasonable aggro deck or burn, like you can't cast this for very much if you're at like 8 life, you know.
I
So I don't know. I'm not a fan of this because I feel like the other black win conditions, as you said, like Master of the Veil will just kill people like more efficiently than this without room for counterplay, and I don't know. I don't think this card's very good at low values of X.
so I did forget the second Death State, but this card still keeps up with Children of the Clouds in terms of raw stats at 4 mana and outpaces it at 5 mana. So I agree that you should be comparing values of X, but it still is outperforming in terms of raw stats. I think in terms of life, yeah, this card is really not the threat you want in your deck if you're playing against Burn.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're playing against control or combo or even a lot of mid-range decks as a more controlling deck, this card's insane. So maybe as like sideboard tech or something, in the traditional
See
like
that?
I'll run Jara Champion as my like pivot threat that we sometimes see out of like
I actually do really like this as villainy sideboard tech.
yeah, this
Um,
card
yeah.
honestly, I don't hate this in villainy main decks because villainy decks
Mm-hmm.
play really well with having creatures, but they're very much incentivized to not put creatures in their deck.
Mm-hmm.
Because of
Okay.
the villainy draw cards. And villainy decks have so much life to play around with more often than not.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. There are places where I can see this card being playable. I'll take that back.
Yeah.
Uh,
But
yeah.
um yeah, the life loss probably makes it harder to justify in the main deck of control than I was making it out to be.
All right. So the next card we got is moving on to red. We have Shapur, the fifth Shah. So this is a 2 mana 2/1. When he enters the battlefield, you get to exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, and then until end of turn, you can cast it. And it would get exiled, of course. So if that sounds familiar, it's because it is. It's Snapcaster Mage, pretty much verbatim, except not Flash. But the upside you have is he has a Monument ability for 5 mana that comes in as a Mana Rock, but it copies every spell that you cast that isn't cast from your hand. Um,
Yeah, very Pyromancer's goggly, except instead of copying spells that
yeah,
cast with that mana, it has a different copy condition. But yeah.
yeah. So in general, I mean, Snapcaster Mage only at sorcery speed in red is like totally fine. Like it's not amazing. It's not like $80 card worthy, but it's like definitely playable. And you're still getting an extra value off of this. Like say if you're looting this away or milling it, you can always like in the late game, just drop this. It's gonna ramp you a little bit. And if you have other flashbacks, say like I don't know revelations, or if you have extra impulse effects, then yeah, this card is like kind of the real deal, I'd say.
Also, other monuments, copies.
Other monuments, yeah.
I have a couple issues with this card. And they're all really minor things, and it's possible that they add up to being something larger. It's possible that they don't. So the first thing is the ETB is mandatory. So whereas Snapcaster Mage, you could like target a spell and not cast it, and just kind of like threaten to cast it,
Mhm.
or even just play it out as a creature on curve and not feel bad about it. This, if you're targeting a spell, you are more or less priced into utilizing it. Um, Also, the flash on Snapcaster Mage is so huge, both for being able to trade efficiently with aggro creatures, and also for being able to pressure combo and control decks. Tapping out to cast this feels kind of bad. Um,
I agree. I don't think this is nearly as good as Snapcaster Mage in decks where like you would normally play Snapcaster Mage, obviously. However, what I do like about this card is ramp decks. Um, I think ramp decks often care about playing mostly on sorcery speed anyway, and they'll have the extra mana to use the monument to get that extra value. And then you care about the mana rock, and presumably you'll be casting spells worth copying, like Recall Forgotten Neons.
Yep. Maybe in ramp decks this has more of a home. That sounds pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can
Also, not the
see.
worst than just burn. Like Snapcaster Lightning Bolt is a totally reasonable play.
I feel like you'd slightly prefer Reprising Board, but maybe that's wrong.
I don't agree at all. I think Reprising Bard is not a good burn card because you don't get the immediacy.
Yeah,
I
that's
would
fair.
much rather just pay the extra mana to get my Scorch right away. I think.
Yeah, I could see that. Um, I think the other awkward thing about this card for Snapcaster Mage is, in canon, there's no real card like Snapcaster Mage. It's in a class unto itself. It doesn't really have competition except like Jace Vryn's Prodigy, and that's not real competition.
Yeah.
Whereas MSEM has both Reprising Bard and Cane Dancer as our Snapcaster likes. So you definitely, I think this card will need to find a niche that's unique.
Yeah,
And
I don't think Shapur is as good as Cane Dancer. Cane
yeah,
Dancer already is in kind of a class of its own, to be honest.
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
Um,
not having to pay on Cane Dancer makes even its very, I guess, its newfound very strict restrictions. Uh, Despite that, it's still like not only a very playable card, but I think probably one of the most competitive cards in the format.
And Cane Dancer is probably like top 5 MSEM cards, right? Am I
I
crazy?
could believe
This
that.
this is what we should do an episode where we just bring our top 10 cards to
Okay,
the
so now
table.
this is what we're doing. Forget Alkabah.
Next time. That's gonna be save that for the Beyond Arcane review. Come on now.
All right.
All right.
Well, let's move on to the next card then. It's Bustling Bazaar, and this card is a bit bizarre. Um, it's but it's a 4 mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you get to return an artifact, an instant, or a sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Then it has this weird little activated ability: sacrifice a non-token artifact, create 2 tapped treasure tokens. So, like, that's got to be breakable somewhere, right?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Is this card looks aggressively breakable?
So, like, okay, core charge exists, right? This card not only returns your core charge, but also, like, very quickly fills your board with artifacts that also can help you cast multiple core charges. Maybe you do this in, like, a deck with, like, core charge and ride the storm and just try to, like, this is some kind of new storm deck? I don't know.
It also can recur is Fateful Eruption the Kahembo Old Dawn card?
Yes, I love Fateful Eruption. Oh my
Um,
god, so many possibilities. Oh, this works with Dragon Gate as well.
it's also really close to working with Forgotten Heirloom, which is a
Mhm.
card from MSC or the Master
It's
Set
from
New bonus sheet.
Masters 2020?
Yeah,
Yeah.
designed by CFT Sock. And it has tap 3 untapped artifacts you control, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. And it also like can tap for mana or tap for cards. So this allows you to sacrifice it and generate artifacts that you can then use to recur it. The issue is the artifacts are tapped, so you need to get really convoluted if you want it to be like an actual like infinite combo there. Um, but it does mean that every passing turn you're recurring it more and more times and creating more and more treasures. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like this card's definitely quite breakable. I'm kind of scared of it, to be honest.
yeah.
This definitely feels like a card
uh,
that like the the like I feel like this is a card that insert name El Makino, one of those brewers, is going to like take to League, and we'll know before the GP if it's breakable. That type
I
of
mean, this
thing.
card seems pretty good in one of my favorite decks, so maybe I'll play it.
It's true.
Ooh.
Um, the next card is another Prowess Stork, and according to one of our resident Prowess players, possibly the better of the Prowess Storks that we're talking about so far, um, which is
Mhm.
Pagan Archer. 1 red for a 1 with Prowess, and when it dies, it deals damage to target player or planeswalker equal to its power. Um, as a control player, this card scares me shitless. Like,
I think I agree with them, by the way. I think this card's better than
yeah,
the Zip Enforcer.
this card is like the best case scenario for you on this card is you immediately answer it, and you trade even on mana and take a damage. That isn't where you want to be as a control deck, and it just gets substantially worse from there.
Die,
Um,
control players, die.
one thing that this makes me want to do is register Rift Splicing more often, because Rift Splicing
Ooh.
means you don't take damage off of this when it dies.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rift Slicing is really good. So,
Yeah, but in general, 1/1 prowess is like almost playable. They can't easily block this without taking damage. If they sweep the board, they're taking at least 1 damage. If they're blocking it in combat to kill it, they're taking damage as if it wasn't blocked, and it's still eating their board. Like, this card's just kind of obnoxious to handle.
yeah, this card's really good. You don't have to Rift Slicing. You can also just like exile it with out of body experience or Journey's End or something. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, in general, this card's very, very good in like against control specifically. I agree. And also, I think like if you have a way um, to sacrifice this as well, like proactively damaging your opponent can be really nice. So like maybe you like cast a couple spells. Like maybe there's a like some kind of variant where like what's a good sack like find greater purpose or something.
Mm.
I don't know. That seems maybe a bit too cute, but um, yeah, I don't know. These cards good.
There's also the Love Song Explorer that's similar to this but has cadence instead of prowess.
Yeah, Painwheel
Oh yeah,
Explorer. Hmm.
is there a land that is a good stack outlet in this format?
Um, I know one was just printed in Midnight Hunt, but we didn't add that to MSEM,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Okay. Well, if there is, maybe they can do something with that. All right.
Um,
Next card.
yeah, last red card is
Or
really
yeah,
quick.
yeah. It's a reprint. Crash through. Creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Draw a card. This is a reprint, presumably because it's a somewhat played card in Modern Prowess. So it's here, so you can play it in your Prowess decks. It's a
Yep.
good card. It
This card
cantrips. It makes your
saw
creatures bigger. Lets them get past jump blockers. Good stuff.
it, it saw slash sees play in Pioneer as well, and also in Mono Red, Steamkin, and Standard. It does exactly what you expect to, not really anything more, not really anything less.
Yeah. Sweet.
All right,
All right, let's move on to green.
our last Shaw is up next.
Ooh, nice. Okay. So Golna, the first Shaw, he is a 3-mana 1/1, and when he enters the battlefield, you get Sheer, who is a legendary 3/3 cat with trample. And then he has a Monument ability for 7 mana. You get an artifact that gives your creatures trample, haste, and hexproof, and you also have a static ability that lets you, or sorry, an activated ability that lets you pay 4 mana to make a 2/2. So the comparison I'll make this with this card is to Blade Splicer. I don't think this is as good as Blade Splicer because first strike on a 3/3 is really obnoxious, but trample isn't negligible, and you can have this flashback, like the Monument ability that lets you like win stalled games essentially. If you do get to 7 mana, you can just drop this out, and then every turn you can pump out 2/2s so your opponent can't target any of your creatures, and your whole board has haste. So like, I think for the amount of stats you're getting early on and the late game potential, this card seems like a really good card for pod chains, and pretty useful for like maybe blink decks as well. Yeah, overall, I don't know. It seems like a nice little niche role player. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think the other thing that should be remembered comparing this to Blade Splicer is this token is legendary, which means this is much worse flickering it than Blade Splicer.
Oh yeah, I
I,
didn't think
I
about
think
that.
this card's just kind of a little bit awkward. It's definitely one of those cards that like feels like it would have been a standard
Oh, Pip, you're cutting out.
all-star. A little too inefficient. It's close.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Kai?
No, not really. I think y'all covered it. It's a lot of value, but also uh, you're gonna need to find the right shells to actually make great use of that because MSEM already has a lot of cards that generate good value for their rate. So you need to be able to specifically either exploit ramping this after the grave or potting it, something like that. Yeah. Okay. Next up, we're going to be getting Blessing of Golna. Hey, back-to-back Golna cards. So, front side is a simple instant speed, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature control. More interesting is the backside, Monument Golna's Heart, 2/2 with trample, and whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on Golna's Heart.
Yeah, it's this card's kind of low impact, but it's 2 effects you'd want. So, getting a +1/+1 counter on creatures and counters is good, especially because if you have Katie out, it kind of snowballs. And the creature you can cast this as is also like, if you could play Golnus Heart as a 1 green creature, you'd be kind of tempted to. I'm not certain you would, but you'd be close. Um, I don't know. I don't have a lot to mention.
Yeah, this is one of those cards where like it feels like a solid role player, but it's also like a little underrated for effects that are typically playable in MSEM. It's kind of just like it exists and it might find a role in one of these counter-based decks, but if not, it won't be surprising either. Okay. Uh, Next up is going to be, let's look at it. Doop, doop. Martub Beastkeeper. So I love the way that Dodger sold us initially, which is it's a 2/2 with trample that can potentially grow to a 3/3. It's basically Wild Nacatl. Uh, and I think what is it? It's which is a bannable card in Modern or something. But yeah, I think that like
Yeah.
I think that seeing this as a 2/2 base because it's literally like is since it starts off with 0 counters, literally any spell you cast makes it a 2/2. Is a really good way of looking at it, and the fact that it grows with counters, like we just saw Golden's Heart, but also like Avatar of the Natural and other such and like Kati. There's like a bunch of stuff that actually cares about you having counters, and this is just like even on its own, it's just like a solid stompy threat. So yeah,
I think for
I'm not.
me,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, like, for me, I would want to make sure, like, I have some number of, like, at least 2 color cards in my deck. Like, Emirabi's Disciple seems like a definite auto include. Maybe you could even splash white for Anomalion. I don't know.
Mhm.
Um,
Or like, hey,
Um,
you could do black for Pitwilt. I could totally see that too.
or I would kind of want to play Solar Flare in this deck. Like, I don't usually want to play Solar Flare in aggro decks, but this is a context in which I would be very happy to do so.
yeah, that makes sense.
Pitwilt is also kind of sexy, I think, because like it functions as like a 3 color card. So like you can definitely, if you have other 2 color cards that you want to play in this aggro deck, and like our mana bases are like good enough that you can definitely, if you're willing to go a little bit all in, you can support like a 3 color aggro deck where it's just like, yeah, like I'll play Martu Beastkeeper on one, um, turn 2 play Emirabi's Disciple, turn 3 Pitwilt their blocker or like Walker or something, and then just now my
So,
Martube is big.
so actually, I think I was about to say it forces you to do some awkward sequencing, and I think you actually highlighted it unintentionally. The line you described is actually wasting potential on Martu Beastkeeper.
Right.
You want
Okay.
to
Yeah.
curve this into a 1 color card,
Right. So
and then that
you
into
want
a
to
two
curve
color
into
card and
like
3 color.
Avatar of the Natural or something. Fair. So like
Which is specifically awkward because if you're an aggro deck, your 2 color cards are going to naturally end up in the two mana slot because you're playing like double density 2 drops. You're playing Emirabi's Disciple. You're playing, etc. And so I think it's going to cause some slight tension there because it's going to make your second turn either end up wasting mana or wasting counters. Um, but putting that aside, I still think this card is good enough. I just think that's going to be a thing that people will possibly lose games to if they're not careful and blame the card when really they need to just tighten up their sequencing a bit.
Yeah, I get that. I definitely could see that happening. All right, should we get ready to dive into the multicolor cards,
hell
of which
yeah.
we will be talking about 28.
Oh Lord. Okay.
Not that many.
hmm I mean, no time like the present. So.
All right, let's do it.
Oh no! Wait. We literally have double the number of multicolored cards exactly than the number of monocolored cards. My God.
And there are a lot of multicolor cards that I think are like pretty good that aren't on this list. So
Yeah, we had to be really
uh,
real selective so that
yeah,
we can keep it in time. So the first
yeah.
one is Amaret Pride of Siricon, 2 red white for a 6 loyalty planeswalker. As long as it's your turn, it's a 4/4 angel with flying haste, indestructible, and whenever it attacks, you attach any number of equipment you control to them. +2, create 2/1/1 white color creature tokens with lifelink. -3 is a War Leader's Helix. -4, you make weapons to just buff your entire team. Um, I like this is one of those cards where it's like it's real bomby. It's real bomb. This big bomb. But like I'm wondering where do you like exploit that potential because 6 mana is definitely like an awkward spot on the curve when you're not like ramping this out or something. So I'd like to hear what your guys' thoughts on that are.
So I think what really makes this awkward to play is just like the double red, double white, um, because it kind of restricts the number of decks that this could go into. Like if this was like 6 mana, I actually could see like, or sorry, just like 4 red white. I could actually see this being like an Iviana style top end, for like a Jeskai control deck or something. As is, I think my best guess is like maybe this is a, I don't know, an epic encounter target for Naya ramp. Uh, but even then, the mana cost is a bit restrictive.
Yeah, I think one other issue I have with this card is the fact that the -3 isn't a War Leader.
Oh no, hello?
Pip, I think we lost you. Oh no, it's doomed.
But yeah, I think what Pip was going
Okay,
to say that it's like is the Mindstreak isn't actually truly a War Leader Helix because you can't go face or other walkers, and you have to rely on actually just Amrit whacking them in the face to do
yeah. I mean,
damage that
like if
way.
you think of this as like a 4/4 haste, right, with flying, that's like a 5 mana card, right? You can play that for 5 mana with like another good upside, something like Adaroth, and you have a good card, right? So you're adding an extra mana, and you're getting a planeswalker, so you can't block with it, but you get all these extra abilities. So it can keep spitting out lifelink dorks, it can kill creatures, and if you have a board wide enough, you can like make a bunch of weapons and then actually put them all on Amoret and attack for like 1,000,000 damage, right? So I don't know. I think this card is better than it looks, but I'm not sure what deck actually wants to run it. I guess that's where I'm at with this.
And I feel like that's kind of, it's not a theme for all of these cards, but I feel like there's definitely lots of cards here where, because of the heavy multicolored costing on them, it's gonna take some work to find out what shells or lists they can like find a home in.
Yeah. I don't think this card is straight unplayable though. Like I think
Oh no,
they definitely bring
it's like
a lot.
it's so stupidly powerful that like it can. I feel like it single-handedly manifests a deck around it because you're like, God damn, this shit's good. How do I make this work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
Okay, so next up we have another Planeswalker, Aminato Justicar. So this is an Esper Walker. Comes in with 4 loyalty. The +1 is scry 2 and make a 1/1 flyer. The -2 is judge each creature you control. So as a reminder, judging lets you either put a +1/+1 counter on that creature, or you can sack it to draw a card. And you can actually do this. You can do different things for different creatures. So you can like put a +1/+1 counter on most of your creatures, and then sack like one of them if you don't want that one. And then the -8 is, I don't know, some nonsense. I never read this honestly. For each card type, search your library and graveyard for a card of that type. Okay, so this lets you cast a bunch of random spells. Yeah. Sure, whatever. Like the main thing you want to do with this card is +1 to get a scry 2 and make a 1/1 with flying. That's a very good +1 for a 4-mana walker. Like used to be the good 4-mana walkers would like just make a 1/1 on plus, right? Like Elspeth. But this card makes a 1/1 flyer and scries 2. The -2 is also quite good. It can either just be a Johnny Goldmane, where you just buff your whole board, or if you want extra cards, you can sack however many creatures you want. I think this card's great. I think this card is like close to MSEM staple level.
Damn. Okay. I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't like low on this, but I was like, this card is good, but it's good in a way where I'm a little, because like it feels like most of the time this is going to be, or like the way that I feel about this is that it's like a bitter blossom that also gives you a scry 2, and then sometimes you just like -2 to win, which isn't the worst. But if you're paying like 4 mana in Esper colors for it, I'm just kind of like, it feels like there's like not as much flexibility as you usually want out of a walker and out of a card that's like kind of like taxing
I think the
colors.
minus is pretty flexible. I think it's definitely useful because like if you get a big enough board presence, your opponent just like, this is just an anthem. And it can
yeah,
like,
it definitely closes out games quite fast compared to like...
Johnny Goldmane was really powerful in the past, literally just for his -1. This is like a better version of that. It doesn't give vigilance, but like it lets you draw extra cards if you need to. And the card that actually provides its own board presence while also giving you card selection. That's what really solves it for me, I think. Like it's kind of just like a self-contained package. I don't know. Do we have Pip again?
Yep.
What do you think about Aminato?
One other thing that I think is a little bit interesting with this card is its place in Esper Skies. Some for Esper Flyer, some of the flying aggro decks that have been played with are Esper colored already. This slots in really well there. Even if not in the main deck, this is an amazing sideboard tool.
This is like one of the best control walkers that we have in the format.
That's really sad to think about.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, this card only does one thing, and it does it well, but all it does is like make tokens and help you turn things sideways. Right?
So what you're saying is, Aminato is basically Zenitsu. So when we eventually make our anime secret lair, we're just gonna put Zenitsu over Amanatu. That's what we're going for.
Bruh.
Like, I think if you're comparing control walkers, I don't think this card is in like the same tier as Xerix, for instance.
Okay, maybe, yeah, okay, maybe not like control walkers, but like, I feel like this card is just really good. I don't know.
This card
Maybe I'm
has a
tripping.
very good rate, and
Yeah.
I think it's notable that both Johnny and Elsbeth, who are all-stars, were all-stars in their respective standard decks. I
Elspeth was a strong Martin card for a while, but kind of
that's
has been
but
crapped
like
out.
that's also like back in the days where Huntmaster of the Fells was a great modern card.
Take me back. Take me back. Hey, Huntmaster of the Fells is now more expensive than Tarmogoyf, so shows what
It's
you
true.
know.
Uh,
All right. Should we move on?
Yeah, I'm ready to talk about. Are we at Haddock?
Hadak, End of Progress. Yeah.
Thank you. Um, this card's just kind of whack. It's cool.
This card is really funny.
So-
So what it does is it's a 4-mana creature. It's black, red, green, white. It is a 4/4 flying, so good rate. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, you may have it deal damage equal to Hadak's power instead, which is 4 by default. So yeah, it's pretty good. I don't know. I think pinging, you want ways to like repeatedly ping your opponent. I'm not sure what the best ways to do that are actually.
Alvarez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alvarez
Not
gives
a bad
you
idea.
1 mana, discard a card, deal 4 damage to any target, also get a +1/+1 count on it.
That
Eli.
ain't
Eli is also
Ooh.
that.
I love the Eli thing. That's really good because you can play Eli and your opponent can kill it, and you can play this and immediately still deal 4 damage.
You know what feels really bad?
Yeah.
Them playing this when they have a Rakiri Dissident out.
Ooh.
Oh.
Ooh. It's a source. It's
Wait,
a
no,
source
it says you
Yeah,
control.
it's a source you
Yeah,
control.
sorry.
So you'd need the Rakiri
but
Dissident.
you-
So
but
you can
yeah.
play this.
that.
You can play this with Recurity Dissident.
Yeah.
And
your
and that,
opponent
yeah,
will
and
have
that just
yes.
ends games.
I don't know.
Yeah, but
I kind
also,
of have
like,
a
I
hard time
think-
picturing a deck that wants to play this and Recurity Dissident though.
Yeah,
It's a hard
the
sell.
double colors are hard. Yeah, I think also in addition to Eli, if you want, I feel like Eli is good, but I think it's a little slow, especially with the tapped bullet. I think that what's the really stupid 3-mana not Amelie main, Ael'Tazan. I think Ael'Tazan, doing like
Yeah.
like
Pretty good with
yeah.
Alkazan.
Yeah.
Problem is it hits you for more damage too, but
that's
Nope,
fair. But
you
but
may.
you're probably like breaking the disparity by having a 4/4 flyer and actually just killing them first.
You can have it deal 4 damage to them and 2 damage to you.
Oh, you may have you may have it deal damage. It's not like
Oh,
a must.
wait. Oh, yeah, I'm trolling.
Holy.
okay.
Okay.
Poggers.
This card is also really funny. The other ones that come to mind are Mountain Grunt. Oh, sorry, Mountain Runt. Flipping it to
Yeah.
Mountain Grunt.
I love Mountain Run.
And also honorable mention to Staff of Equilibrium, immediately shooting someone for 8 or more.
Ooh. That hurts.
Yeah, so this is spice. This is definitely spice.
This is one of those cards like you can make so many different like well, if I string together these specific cards, my opponent just dies. And like maybe it's not that good, but it's really
Yeah,
fun.
probably the challenge is making a deck that functions well without Hadak, but wins the
Yeah.
turn, wins if you kind of either land or untap with Hadak, essentially.
I agree.
I do think Alvarez is going to be part of that puzzle because Alvarez means you always have a payoff for Hadak if you want. And playing extra lands when you're trying to support a 4-color guy is like probably reasonable, but I don't know, genuinely. Yeah, we can speed up.
Sweet.
Okay, so next up is Muktan Protectors. This is Blacklist Enchantment, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you get a 2/1 white sand creature with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get a 3/1 red sand creature with haste. Enchantment or artifact, 2/2 with hexproof. Land, 3/3 green sand creature. So, are you playing the game? You're getting creatures for it.
unless for whatever reason you cast a Planeswalker,
Ah,
which
cringe.
awkwardly doesn't protect. So I think it's very hard to lose if you untap this card. I think it's very easy to build a 4-color control deck which plays this, and then just a pile of instants and sorceries. Because I think that's where this card is best, is when you are like untapping it within it, casting like a cantrip into a removal spell, swinging for 6. You play a land, you've generated 9 power that turn. Like, this card is kind of like Felidar Retreat on crack. 4 mana is also a very good mana cost in MSEM because it means you dodge Pithwilt.
Mhm.
Uh, I I think this card's legit. I'm not. I'm willing to be wrong on it. I'm probably going to try a couple of builds with it, but I really like what this card is doing conceptually.
I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's like I think it's like maybe like a good 2 of. I wouldn't
Yeah,
want to
I
run
can
more
see
than
that.
that, but like yeah, I mean if you do untap with this, it's pretty hard to lose. I agree. Yeah, that's all I really got to say about it.
Let's get to Rastad. How how do you pronounce that one?
I think,
Just Rustad.
yeah.
Rastad, who flips into Farib. Um, so the front half is 2 blue red for a 4/4 prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, draw a card, which is kind of nuts. And then at your end step, if you have 4 more cards in hand, transform them into a 4/4 hexproof. Discard 2 cards. You can cast target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard this turn. If it would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile instead. At the beginning of your end step, if you have 2 or fewer cards in hand, transform them. This is just like a crazy amount of value for 4 mana. It's like a good body on both sides. The backside has hexproof, which is like one of the best places for your control finisher to be. You can turn all your extra lands into gas, and then if you do run out of things, it flips into the front side who starts drawing you cards again.
Yeah, this card seems like a weird hybrid of like a mid range and control piece.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's like blue red, which is traditionally not the kind of colors that play mid range in MSEM. So it's
It's
interesting. It might lead to like some new archetypes being built. Like maybe people play like Teamer or something with this.
I think the
I
like
don't know.
awkward thing is the best deck in MSEM for this right now is Grixis Garth, and there's a slight hiccup there.
Huh.
Um, but maybe you play Garthless Grixis Garth with this card instead.
I don't know. What about this card in ramp? I think this card's pretty good in ramp, right?
Um, I think this card. I I guess it depends on how you build ramp.
You can actually even like okay, let's say you play your Tent to the Grove on 3, right? And you
Yeah,
get your epic encounter. This is a great card to epic encounter in that situation.
yeah, that's a fair point. I think there have been builds of ramp that run more non-creature spells, like
Hmm.
especially a bunch of interactive spells. Those are the ones that I'm looking to play this in. I think the more your deck like is Tyrant of Tribute centric, I guess is how I would describe it, the less I'm
Yeah,
interested.
yeah, I agree. Um, I don't know, I think we can all agree. Very solid rate. 2 good abilities on both sides.
Yep.
Should probably eventually find a home somewhere.
Um, the next one is our final Planeswalker, I believe.
I
Uh,
think so too. Yeah,
and I think it is maybe the least playable of them. Um,
I would agree.
Shalana,
Yeah,
Planner Outcast,
You think
5
You think
mana.
Shalana is less playable than Melee?
Oh, that's a good point. Um, I think maybe yes, just because Shalana has more competition than Maryland.
That is actually a fair point.
So the entire selling point of Shalana is when she enters the battlefield, each player chooses a creature they control and sacrifice the rest. And the idea is you kind of break parity because you have this +1 to make your creature double strike and haste and yada yada. Um, that enter the battlefield effect is historically not a very powerful effect. Um, Divine Reckoning is not a very good card.
hmm
And I think the like circumstance you need to contrive where this card is good is like kind of outrageous. Um, and 5 mana is just so much mana. So I don't have that much to say about it other than I'm pretty confident it's bad. And
yeah,
yeah,
I agree. I think it's cool to have like recurring characters showing up on different planes, though. I think it's cool that
strongly
Shala
agree.
Yeah,
does that.
and
But
the
that's
little
pretty much all I got to say
the
about
little
it.
lore tidbit here is that Marilay is from a different set made. It's like a Dungeons and Dragons based set made by Tintenture. Shalana is
Oh,
from
neat.
Urshad. They both kind of end up meeting here, and Shalana is a planar outcast because she essentially kind of like dips at the last moment in the climax of Scriptures of Urshad and essentially is like, what am I doing? And in this set, by hanging out with Marilay, is like, yeah, you know what? They, I might have like I might have done like one bad thing, but I'm gonna like live my life or some shit. But basically, yeah, it's like a rebound bounce back story. So
Oh, and Amaret is from Zengi's one of Zengi's other sets,
yeah,
Secrets of the River Cities.
this is actually Amrit's home plane,
Oh, neat.
Secrets of the River Cities was their first appearance in the canon. But yeah,
All right.
So,
Yeah.
Dodger,
wanna
you
do
should. Yeah, please take this card.
Okay, so next up is the Tale of Kings, which is kind of like I want to say the marquee card for the set. The Tale of Kings is the in lore version of the Shahnameh, which is basically like kind of this epic tale of a bunch of different very important figures. So like I think when you're thinking about what this card should be, like from a design perspective, it has to be really epic and grandiose. And I really think Zangi succeeded at doing that. So what this card does is it's a 5 mana, or sorry, it's a 6 mana spell. It costs one generic and then one of each color. It's a sorcery, but it costs one less for each color among legendary permanents you control. Notably, we are changing this before release so that it doesn't like double up. So if you have a 3-color creature, you choose one of those colors, and then that color is reduced. But the rest of the effect is the same. So for each color, you choose a legendary permanent you control that is that color, and you create a token that's a copy of it, but it's not legendary. So this is like a very, very unique build-around card that has gotten a lot of people theory crafting. And basically the dream scenario is you have one legendary creature of each color, you play this for 1 mana, and you get 5 creatures. But it doesn't have to be like that. You can play a couple legendary creatures and then play this for 4 mana. And if you have those creatures that have multiple colors, you can copy them. You can target them multiple times, once for each of their colors. And since the tokens aren't legendary, you can potentially get like a ton of copies of the same creature. So yeah, kind of a lot of possibilities for building with this card, I think.
Yeah, the fact it can target legendary permanents, I think, is like a really huge selling point in its favor. If you
So
were just stuck with creatures, like
yeah,
you can still make a lot of value out of it, but I'd be less scared of it, I guess. But someone copying a planeswalker 2 to 3 times is just immediately game winning.
yeah, I think insert name was suggesting Dawson as a good target for this. You get 3 Dawsons that usually is pretty good at winning.
I think you have a very hard time losing once you have 3 Dawsons, I would hope.
Actually 4 Dawsons because you have the original too.
Okay, actually, I think I figured out the way that you lose that, and it involves after you remove their entire hand, they somehow have 4 mana and they top deck a rot. That is the only way you lose in that scenario.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think this card is like really iconic. I really love the design. What do you think, Caillou?
yeah, it does such a good job of being incredibly splashy while also doing something that I think is fairly intuitive. Like, and yeah, I think it's a card that I think Zangi had like trouble with and was like doing a lot of iteration on, and I think that the concept that they landed on at the end is one that is pretty cool. And I think it also it really, I think I really like the idea of it being a 5-color card, but really the base rate is usually uh, like in constructed. Obviously, you're like this is usually going to be like probably 3 colors or whatever. But in the case that you have like a single legendary creature, this becomes a 4-color card, which feels really on flavor with the factions. So like once you have a faction leader out, this you can like copy them for their colors. So yeah.
All right. Should we move on?
Yeah, let's do
Yeah,
it.
the next card is very much a card you should read.
All right. Angel of Infinite Faces. It is a 4-color Bant card. It's a 3/3 with flying. Whenever you cast a multicolored spell, make a 3/3 angel with flying. So yeah, I mean, obviously the reason why I picked so I should read it is because it's got the same trigger as Parrot Pools, one of my favorite MSEM cards. I don't think this is really doing the same thing as Parrot Pools, because part of Parrot Pools is like you just want to spam as many cheap multicolor cards, particularly hybrid spells, as possible. This card is much more of like, okay, I'm going to play this, and then if I untap with it, then I'm going to get a ton of value, because 3/3 flyers are obviously a lot better than 1/1 flyers.
I think it's kind of an interesting progression where you have the smallest one is Parrot Pools, and then slightly bigger than that in canon you have General Ferris Rockrick, and then this is like slightly bigger than either of those. The other thing that's of note is this is a Bant colored angel, which means you can do angel color combo stuff with it, which is
Ooh, I
really
didn't think about that.
because every single playable Bant angel we get makes that deck slightly more real.
Angel Caller got a big buff in this set, actually.
Yeah, there are some really nice cards for Angel Caller deck. Also, the fact that I think all of the things are angels on their front faces and demons on the back is like
A couple of them are demons on the front.
Oh, never mind. I was gonna say that's like perfect for that deck, but it's only okay for that deck.
Yeah, and the back half doesn't count as the color, so they're actually not that good. But like,
I mean, it still makes it into a 2-mana mana dork, which is kind of huge.
Not
but
bad.
Yeah, this card is, I think, just solidly neat. I think if you want to play with it and build it, I think the main thing that I would say is don't focus on playing. Don't try and play more than 2 spells a turn with it. If you're proccing this once each turn, this card is almost good enough as is. If you're proccing it twice, one turn and then once the next turn or whatever, that's fine. That will kill your opponent just fine.
Yeah. All right. Shall we move on?
Yep.
Sweet.
Boon of the Pax is 3 mana, black green, enchantment, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you have to sacrifice it or a non-snake creature, and then you get a 1/1 snake with Death Touch. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Oh boy, this is a lot of different things that it does that are all pretty powerful in their own right.
Yeah.
I think you don't play this card unless you have like you plan on keeping it around for 1 turn. I would say, if you have at least 1 creature that you can sack to it, I think this card is good enough.
Oh yeah.
I think if you keep it for more than 1 turn, you're rolling. So this card with like Union Rail Strikebreaker or anything else that allows you to generate disposable tokens, this is potentially generating you so much advantage because it's a mana advantage, it's a card advantage, and at the same time, it's potentially it's potentially turning 1/1s without Death Touch into 1/1s with Death Touch, which is huge.
This is one of my favorite build around cards for like a cube.
Oh, that sounds so fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, this easily could have said non-token creature, and then it would have been like still very good, but like with less of a crazy ceiling. As it is now, this is just so hype. Like, I think that this card is it's hype in a way where it's like there's other like Tale of Kings, you just kind of like play it and you build around it and you just kind of slam it and go off. This is more of like, yeah, if I play this and it sticks around, it's really good value, but like it slots into lots of potentially existing shells in either a clean way or you just like tweak some things here and there, and it's like, yeah, maybe I can just try it out.
Departed Evangel.
Yep. I mean, Departed Evangel, Impton Mother. I could see
Departed Evangel is no good.
Yeah. I could see like a more like, I say more mid-rangey because I think that lots of the Aristocrats decks right now are like really trying to get like more like really fast kills. Yeah, they're more aggro. But yeah, this is like fine even in those builds, I think, because one thing that happens is like if your opponent shuts down some of your recursion engines, it can be really hard to get back into the game. And just having this thing as like, well, I'm just going to dig really deep and draw into a bunch more pieces potentially.
I do think the less advantage you get out of the mana ability, the worse this is. In a pretty real way, actually. Like, I think this card becomes instead of being actively good, it becomes fine if it's just a Phyrexian arena. I think you need to be getting discounts on 1 to 2 spells a turn before I think this actually becomes nuts. So I don't know. I think it is a very cool mid-range card, and I also suspect it's good in like sideboard juke type of situations. One weakness it has is it is 3 mana, which means you can pith wilt it, and it can be pith wilted at tempo disadvantage, which is like not really where you want to be in this format. But I still think it's like at least fine, at most nuts.
Yeah.
So the next card is one I put on the list because I keep looking at it and I keep going, I feel like this is nuts, but I can't quite figure it out. So
I don't think it's nuts, but I think it's solid.
So
That's what I'll say.
Contemplate the Cosmos is 4 mana, instant, scry 2, it's blue-white, scry 2, draw 2, gain 2. Honestly, that as is like borderline MSEM playable.
It's not bad because like there's a lot of precedent for like good scry 2 plus inspiration cards in canon, right? And those are usually with like minor upsides. This has 2 pretty solid upsides.
Gain 2 life is such a real upside when it comes to casting your draw spell that doesn't impact the board.
Yeah.
Like, if anyone has played with Fateful Mending yet,
Mm-hmm.
The gaining 2 life when you're like kind of dirtling around is so key. And in MSEM, where the control decks have like a fairly large delta between the best cards in any given situation and the worst cards, scry 2, draw 2 is really where you want to be. And then it also has Monument. And the Monument for 2 white blue is an artifact with at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1, and then you gain 1. So the thing to keep in mind is on this side is you don't play this for the Monument. Because a lot of the time you will have better things to do with your mana. But in the games where you don't, when you like, game slows down, you're trading resources back and forth, the fact that your draw spell drew you an extra card, and that extra card is like the perfect card to have in a game that has settled in that fashion, is just the nuts. Scrying 1 every upkeep gets you to relevant action, allows you to start pulling ahead, and the gaining life means that if you aren't the first person to top deck a threat, you at least have some extra wiggle room to go with. So yeah, this card is like competing with some really strong contenders. Like you have to compete with Worlds Away and Gaze Deeper, both of which are, potentially very nuts. But both of those cards have a fail case of being 5 mana. So if I think there are curves that you can construct in control decks where 4 mana is the perfect spot for you to have your draw spell.
Yeah, I really like the game life aspect of this in particular. I think one of the biggest determining factors is just going to be like whether you can find a window to actually deploy the Monument at sorcery speed, and then like untap and be fine. And if you can, like, if you get that window, it's a great way to kind of ensure you never really fall behind again.
So the next card is also one that I want to take on, and then I think I'll be probably quiet for the next like couple cards. No, that's a lot. The next card is like, I cannot have asked for a more perfect card for the types of decks I like to play. So Cosmic Coalescing is X blue red instant. It deals X damage to any target, and then you get to wish for a non-creature card with mana value X or less you own from outside the game put into your hand. XL Cosmic Coalescing. It also has X can't be 0 as part of a errata that it has received before release. So where does this card shine? This card shines in Heart Attack. This card is a reason that you no longer need to be black or green in Heart Attack, which just completely opens up a huge range of builds for that deck. It is both an outlet for having Heart of Zadina, in that it's an X damage burn spell, and also it wishes for literally anything out of your sideboard. So if you have Heart of Zadina, you could play this for X equals 1, and then grab a one of, I don't know, you could grab a one of Mastery of the Veil that you keep in your sideboard despite being a Jeskai deck. Because when you need it for a Heart of Zadina kill, you have it.
One thing I like about this card when compared to like a normal Wish is that like you don't really need to change your sideboard that much for it to be useful, you know?
Yeah. I also lied when I said you could cast X equals 1 to grab Master of the Veil. You have to cast X equals 2 at least. But
Yeah.
the other thing that's really good, so it's an outlet for that. It also can grab Heart of Zadina. So you cast it for a 3-mana burn spell, you deal 1 damage to something, and you grab Heart. I have Epic encountered for Heart more than literally any other card in that deck's sideboard. And while obviously being able to cast Epic Encounter on 2 is like really useful, it helps you like, hit your spells on curve, etc. This being an instant, I think will come up more. Um
It has
so
all the other functionalities as well. So
yeah, like
yeah.
you can use it to grab I could see leaving just a 1-mana removal spell in your sideboard in game 1, and you board it in versus like aggro or whatever. And in game 1, you can just wish for it in circumstances where you really just need a get that thing off the board right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, this card is just very good at doing a shocking variety of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not have my eye on it at all until you mentioned it, and then I was like, oh, yeah, wait, no, never mind. This is just like Mastery of the Veil plus Epic Encounter, and like with good flexibility. Yeah, this card is nuts. I'm a big fan. I think this is probably of the cards we've talked of today the one that I'm most excited to like brew around or try to make a deck around now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. So next up we have Cosmic Lineage. Now this is probably my favorite individual design in the set. Here's what it does. It's a 4-mana Bant instant. You may reveal any number of creature cards you own from outside the game with the same name and put them into your hand, and then exile itself. So this is like a 4-mana instant that draws you 4 cards. They're all guaranteed to be the same creature. So there's just a really interesting level of kind of like endless possibilities of what exactly like what's your 4 package in your sideboard that you're going to finish the game with.
Oh, you keep
Like, are you
saying
going to get Angel of Infinite Faces, and then just like do Angel into Angel and start making a much more 3/3s? Like, I don't know.
yeah, I think
Uh,
you misspoke somewhere there. You said 4 copies. Uh,
oh, are we getting
yeah.
Sanitarian Legion
Oh no, we're getting 15 copies of
or
Dragonwall
Dragon
Fragment.
Wall
Yeah,
Fragment?
we're getting 15 copies of
Ah,
Dragonwall
yes.
Fragment, and you're gonna like it.
Yeah, I mean, who am I to? Yeah,
But yeah, I think
that sounds like a
when you
deck
think
to
of this
ludicrous
as
play.
like, I think like but I think that reading this is like, oops, all Legion Angel is like it's like actually like kind of real. Like I think there's definitely like a still like a tempo loss, and I'm not sure like exactly where you want this, but just like
I mean, how Tempo Loss is 4 mana, draw 4, really?
that's fair, especially
It
since
is a
you
little bit of a tempo
but
loss.
like
Like
It's a Tempo Loss, but like
yeah,
just
you
because it's
can
Tempo Loss doesn't mean
yeah
it's bad.
yeah,
yeah, and like
Like all card draws a Tempo Loss.
yeah.
yeah, I think the
I
main thing is like you want to have like like to have a reasonable sideboard, you can probably only have like one full 4 that you grab with this, and
Yeah,
so
there's
it's
probably only one full
and so I
4.
think like you probably want to balance like that full 4 being like playable next turn and also being like stuff that you just drop it and win games because you just drop
It's
card
it's
after card after card.
it's a really interesting question of like what actually is the best creature to get with this, because like if you only get to pick one, then like what is it? I honestly don't know.
okay, so
But I think
I have partially a meme answer and partially a serious answer.
okay,
Sewer pack.
not the worst answer. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Because 4 of those together are 16/16 worth of stats, and unless your opponent kills all of them at once, you can constantly recast the other ones that stayed alive.
Yeah,
Or
that's not bad.
okay. If we have any like semi-modal creatures, I'd be kind of interested in them here because then you can kind of mix and match what they do. But yeah, I think I would like first check to see what lords we have that like really force multiply each other. Um, I think I think my main concern is that I think this card is going to encourage people to build their sideboards in some really stupid ways. Um, where I I think I agree you can only fit 1/4. I think that if you cast this and only get one creature, you feel really stupid. So I think you also need to be aware of, like, yeah, this card makes you want to play, like, hate bears that you can wish for a bit more, but I don't think it's, like, actually that nuts to do that. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think this card is going to encourage people to build decks incorrectly, and that's going to make the card look worse than it actually is. I think what this card is capable of is genuinely impressive.
Yep. All right. So next up we have Sirkan's Messenger.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 4-mana 3/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you tutor for an equipment, and then whenever it attacks, you can put an equipment from your hand onto the battlefield attached to it. There was some discussion about this card, whether we should put it on the list. I think being a 3/3 flyer is like pretty good stats to come along with a free tutor for an equipment, and the fact that it actually attaches it itself like means it lets you cheat on mana as well. So I think like really the only drawback is that it's like slightly below rate on stats, but comes with a tutor and cheats on mana, kind of pretty similarly to Stoneforge Mystic. So I don't know. I think this card's quite strong actually.
Another thing to consider is it having the angel creature type is relevant for cards like Faradia's Collector, I think is the name, or
Faradia's Ascendant, Faradia's Attendant, Faradia's
Attendant,
Disciple.
I think. It's the one that tutors up angels.
Yeah.
And then gets pumped by other angels. So you can have some tutor chains going on with this. I think one thing that's notable about this card is it is a self-contained one-card combo, and also just like the fair use case of it is good. So while it is tempting to like say, oh well, I'm gonna use this to cheat out like an equipment that costs a lot and takes a lot to equip, you could also just grab a Sword of X and Y, and then now you have a thing where it's like, well, they don't want to kill it because if they kill it, they're still down a card because it already tutored up a threat, and that's a good threat. But on the other hand, if it attacks, they're in a really bad spot if you put in something that then makes it harder to kill.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Next up we have Fate for Succession.
Oh yeah.
So
this is a U card, right?
Yeah, this card I put on the list because I think I'm probably gonna register as a fun of one of for a couple of times until I eventually get burned on it. So it's 4 mana for instant, destroy target non-land permanent, which is basically Utter End, which was a fine card in Standard, and has Monument white-black. And the Monument is at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, which is obviously a really slow win condition for control decks. But 2 mana is really easy to weave into your other spells. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I just think the Monument cost on this is so cheap. Like, that's actually like a fair amount of like extra life that you're gaining on top of your removal spell for like not that much of a premium.
Yeah, I think this card like is more. If Alkabah does what I currently think it will do and cause people's MSEM decks curves to rise, I think this card becomes substantially more interesting. Because if you're Fight for Successioning and killing a 3 mana creature or a 4 mana creature or a 5 mana creature, you feel fine. You feel actively good sometimes. If
You
you're
answer
doing
anything except lands, which has become harder to do with the nerfs of cards like Journey's End and Event Horizon.
That's true. So possibly it's also getting a little bit of extra value there. This card feels really bad the more decks are on heavily indexing on CMC 1 and 2 threats. Is my main concern. But
yeah, having more flexible removal definitely helps, and I think that the point of Event Horizon and Journey's End now being more like there being more play to them, is I think that's something that's really relevant. I think maybe this is a weird opinion, but I almost feel like this is kind of useful out of the sideboard versus decks that bring in mid-rangey threats of many types, and that you kind of want good catch-all removal on curve for. But that, I think that like
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree.
Yep. One last thing before we move on. This and other Monument cards are also a good way of gaining additional advantage from playing self-mill cards or looting cards in your deck.
Yeah.
Since anytime you mill over one of these, like, again, their intended usage is to be castable. But anytime your mill spell or your looting spell soft draws you a card, that's a huge deal. So I wouldn't
It
say
has good versions of those too, like Whispered Exploration and Find Happiness and Misery, etc., etc.
yeah, Monkey Shines.
Shines,
Um,
yep.
so any that would be a deck building angle to potentially explore, where you know don't go overboard, but the more of those sorts of effects you can incidentally include in your deck while remaining a functional deck, the more value you can probably grind out in longer games. Next card is a pod card, so I'll give my thoughts on it. Ghoul of Forgotten Past is 2 black green for a 1/2 death touch. When it dies, you may exile it. If you do, return a creature card from a graveyard onto battlefield under your control. You gain life equal to that card's mana value. This card is a kind of neat thing to have access to in decks like Podlight, where you can potentially do some weird pod chains involving recurring Ancestral Council with this. You can't loop with this because it has to exile. The life gain is really nice. The death touch is really nice. If it's recurring larger things, that's also exciting, but you had to get a 4-drop and then have it die. I don't think this card is like great, but I think it is a good card to remember because it has some pretty nice tech usage.
Yeah. That's pretty much all you pretty much summed up my thoughts on it.
Dodger, do you want to take the next one?
All right, let me hypermarrow a little bit. All right, so Ghoulish Unearthing is a 2-mana sorcery, black-red. It has this nice little text. You might not be familiar with it, but it says, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now, some people might not know, but I actually like the cards that tend to do this kind of thing. Because they let you essentially, they give you a little mini game, let you cheat on mana. If you like discard the card early, and it also gives the creature haste until end of turn, which is nice because there's tons of really great 3-drops that like haste in this format, like say Performer of Ambition. I think if you get to the Phoenix Performer of Ambition turn 1 and then give it cheat it out and give it haste turn 2, pretty good play. However, this card also has a Monument ability. So for 5 mana, you can bring it back, and then it becomes an artifact that lets you judge one of your creatures at the beginning of your end step. So you either put a counter on it, or you sack it and draw a card. All that said, I would play this card just for the front part alone. But the fact that when you're discarding cards or you're milling yourself, and you just happen to get this in your yard, this is giving you extra value as well. This card's slam dunk. Yeah.
One thing that I think is really notable about this card is it means you don't need to splash white in decks that you want to have critical density of unearth effects in.
Yeah.
One issue with this card, which I like this being an issue, is you can't play it in Hugo decks. So now you have a legitimate reason to consider non-Hugo unearth builds.
I mean, you already did. Deadwood Terror is a real card.
That's fair.
I played Hugo before because I realized I wasn't running Deadwood Terror anyway, and I was like, hey, I guess Hugo's kind of free. But yeah, you that was just a build. You definitely Hugo versus Deadwood Terror is a trade-off. But now that I have this, I don't think I'll ever run Hugo again in those decks.
Rest in
All
peace.
right.
Next up, we have Mahara's Command. This card
is
what the kids like to call poggers.
Yeah, it's one of a cycle of 4-color commands. I think that we have 2 on this list, if memory serves, and this is one of them. So, pretty simple. Choose 2. Return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Return up to 2 enchantment cards from your graveyard to your hand. Return up to 2 artifact cards from your graveyard to your hand. And the last mode, fucking put a permanent from your hand onto the battlefield. This feels really, obviously, when you're just going ham in Eureka Tell style shell, this is pretty good there, especially just to grind out games as well. But it also just feels like a good fair piece in some decks, especially if you're doing a decent amount of self mill, recurring, using it as a draw 4, or is also I think a real fair mode that I think most people will probably overlook because of how nutty strong that last mode is. But yeah, it's flexible and strong. I'm a big fan.
I think if you manage to return 4 cards with this, that's often, I think, like, just better than the other thing. But, like, obviously depends on how big a permanent you're actually putting in.
Yeah, depends how much mana you also have. Like, this card is threatening in those decks because those decks do run ramp spells and sometimes just naturally end up with 7 or 8 mana. And if your opponent casts this as a draw 4, that means for the next 4 turns you have to answer threats rather than this turn and the next turn. The other thing
oh, sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I would note is while this can put Planeswalkers in from hand, it can't recur them. So I think those decks need to start evaluating their threat suite slightly more because it's been pretty locked in as Crane, Turi, and Velier. With occasional like Tyrant of Tributes shows up, sometimes Ash Ketchum shows up. But for the most part, it's been very Planeswalker centric, and I do wonder if now it's worth reevaluating some of your other enchantment based options or art based options.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, the elephant in the room is probably Unified Theory. Unified Theory can also recur this. So maybe, I don't know. All right.
Okay.
Next up, we have here.
Here into Cosmos. Ooh.
Yeah, so it's a Jeskai 3-mana instant. You can choose one. It's either counter target non-creature spell, deals 3 damage to target creature, or the kind of Angel's Grace effect, where until end of turn, damage that would put your life less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. And then it's also got a monument for 4 mana, which is an artifact that at the end of your upkeep, it deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. So, kind of similar monument to the black-white one, actually. Except it's just twice as much mana and twice as much life.
This card is really cool. The third mode is less good than you'd want it to be. Like if the third mode was an actual like Angel's Grace and thus it like beat things like Casino Scam, I guess it will potentially beat Casino Scam if they switch to a different win con, or Infuse for that matter. I would be like super high on this. As is, I think this card is genuinely exciting. It does 2 useful things at a slightly worse rate, and it has a very good kind of win condition it draws you. The card to compare this to is Crystal Wave. I think Crystal Wave's first 2 modes are better than this card's first 2 modes, but not by a massive margin. And I think this card's third mode, as much as I dislike it, is better than Crystal Wave's third mode, which I have literally never seen cast. And the monument
Angel's Grace is it's not a playable card when you're using it fairly, but like I think just having it as tacked on as a third option to 2 like otherwise good options is really nice because like there are going to be times where it saves your ass. You know, especially like if you happen to have like multiples of these and you can just like stall out multiple turns. I don't know. I think this card is like genuinely very good for like Hersey deck players everywhere. I think they'll enjoy this. Although it does compete with Thunder Road that slot, I suppose.
¿Por qué no los dos? But yeah. Next up, we have Recreator of Myths, another powerful Jeskai card. So it's a Jeskai for 1/4 flying lifelink prowess, and whenever it attacks, you get to do the Dreadhorde Arcanist thing, except not based on power. So, man, this is
cheat on mana. So
it's
kind of weird because it is a Snapcaster Mage proc. Is I think maybe a better way of looking at it because the cheating on mana and power restrictions are huge. Recreator of Myth is like kind of ideal for a more spell-based mid-range deck or a control deck because 1/4 lifelink actually is a relevant line of text.
That's what I was gonna say. That blocks very well. Even has flying.
And then if you do get to attack with it, it's almost certainly going to survive because it's attacking as a 2/5 flyer. Good luck killing that. And you can just start casting removal spells, start casting draw spells, and just bury your opponent. But I think the thing that makes this card actively good is the fact that you can tap out for it on turn 3 and not feel super embarrassed about doing so. Also, maybe the cleric type line comes up. That one seems like a stretch, but I could see it.
I didn't realize
Definitely a
this-
stretch.
I didn't realize it was a cleric though. I can definitely see that like being relevant down the line in some way, especially since we have like Faradia and stuff. But yeah,
Why isn't this a Lamasu for my one Lamasu tribal card from Urshad?
true. It's basically a llama. This is so sad. Can we get an errata? That this is up to you guys.
Alexa, play Despacito.
This says so much.
All right.
Next command. This is the sort of command I'm likely to play.
This is the fuck you in particular command.
So we get the 4 most powerful colors of mana. Not white. Choose 2. Return up to 2 target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. Each opponent sacrifices a planeswalker. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact or enchantment. Hoo boy. This card is just 2 for 1 central. Sometimes you like answer 3 things on board, which is also kind of nuts because, you know, you bounce 2 of your opponent's things and make them sacrifice the thing you really didn't want them to have again. That's really good. Even if it's technically only a 1 for 1, it's a huge tempo swing.
It's like Far Away.
Yeah, I love Far Away.
I love Far Away.
It's a sorcery, 4 mana in 4 colors, so it's not an easy sell by any means. But it's a very flexible card, and it's kind of a one-sided board wipe, so I don't know. I think this gets there.
I mean, people play decks anyway that could run this card, so I don't really see why they wouldn't like at least play a couple copies of this in their board or something. Like, it's just such an efficient answer to basically any kind of permanent. As long as your opponent doesn't have like a shit ton of permanents in play, like this is almost always going to get what you want, I feel like.
So concept, we buffed this by removing the non in that first clause. Eh?
I feel like that arguably makes it worse.
No, sorry.
If you're talking about getting rid of non-land,
Yes, yeah. Let's take we take out the whole non-land.
No, Caillou said, yeah.
Caillou said remove the non. So
Yeah.
two
No.
land permanents. I don't know. I want to.
No. Yeah, sorry. That was a misspeaking.
Oh.
We just removed non-land as a whole. Easy.
Now you're talking. See if you can sell Zangi on that.
True. Okay.
So next up we have Syavid, Commander of Armies. So this is a 2-mana 2/2. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose life equal to the number of armies you control, then recruit. And as we discussed before, you make a 0/0 army, and then you put a +1/+1 counter on each army you control. So this is gonna be making a 1/1 on upkeep the turn after you play it. Then you're gonna lose 1 life. The 1/1's gonna get buffed, and then you get another 1/1. Or if you're sacrificing your 1/1s or trading, this is essentially making you a 1/1 every turn for free. That seems pretty good to me.
You ever heard of Bitter Blossom?
Yeah, I mean this is Bitter Blossom but on a creature, so it's a little easier to answer.
It's a little easier to answer. It's also easier to put in with Monument or tutor up with your Shaw.
That's a very good point. I forgot we have so many ways to take advantage of 2-drops.
Yeah, this card. I was talking with Zangi about this and saying, does this make it an Esper Ninjas? And it sounds like the answer is yes. Because one thing this card does only one thing, which is kill people, but it does it very effectively. So I haven't sat down and done the Rabble Master math on this card, but I'm pretty sure this solo kills people in the span of usually around 5 turns. It might be less.
Yeah, again, I love threats that let you develop your board without having to play any more cards.
Yeah, this card is a little bit of a nightmare, and I think the only circumstance where it'll feel bad is if you cast at sorcery speed and they answer it immediately. And even then, there's only so bad that a 2-drop can feel when that happens, you know? So
I could definitely also see this becoming, like, because of that exponential growth, a perfect hand magic staple. This feels, like, really terrifying for that.
Potentially bannable in PHM, right?
I mean,
Oh,
we
Jesus.
yeah, we have to talk to El
Yeah.
Makino about that, but yeah, I could definitely see that easy. It gives me like big Jar Champ vibes, except like probably
This
worse, but
is
yeah.
so much harder to beat than Jarchamp. If Jarchamp
Actually, this
can,
is a good card to curve into with Jarchamp, right?
Yeah, Jar
oh,
Champ is
is it?
banned.
Okay.
Well,
I
just
don't.
like in regular. Oh wait, no, never mind, never mind. Actually, this doesn't work very well with Jarchamp.
I was gonna say, I don't think you
Yeah.
want to play go wide with Jarchamp if I had to guess.
Well, I was just thinking like way to constantly proc out yourself every turn. But you can also just do that with lands, so it's not the worst thing ever. Or just by like hitting them.
I will also briefly note, don't play this card in a deck that runs Polyp Pools because you'll take extra damage that you shouldn't have to.
True.
Big pro tips here.
Big pro tips.
DAE found another way to abuse Polyp Pools. We
Uh,
died faster.
Okay, the next up is
let's
a
talk
card that
about
yeah, I'm gonna need y'all to sell me on this one. Supreme
This is-
Alchemist.
the most red
Really?
card I've ever seen.
What's hard to justify about this card?
I guess my thing is it's like a Baneslayer, but like it feels like a thing where you probably have to like do some degree of building around it to get treasures, and the payoff is like it's a good beater, but like it feels like it's just a beater.
Okay,
And,
let
like-
me look at the things that make treasures.
And I feel like if we're doing
Treasure beat.
if we're doing treasure
Treasure
shenanigans,
Beach makes 3 treasures for it plus 2 mana.
true. But yeah,
I
You
don't-
can go turn 1 dork into turn 2,
Okay,
5/5 haste.
here are the playable cheap cards that can make treasures.
okay. Wait. And also my question is like, if we're doing this, why aren't we doing like bustling bazaar shenanigans essentially?
I mean, Bustling Bazaar makes it very easy to play this card.
You can do both.
Yeah,
also,
I just think like currency is a thing. Dawson's Collector is around. There's this card called Uncanny Investor, which lets you pay 2 and discard a card to make 2 treasures.
Also, Dawson himself and
Dawson,
Pay
yeah,
Up.
there's Pay Up. There's fucking Cower's Tithe, like one of the most oppressive sideboard cards that no one plays.
True. For record, I don't know how. I feel like Rug Tempo. I guess they can just kill you, but it turns off all their counter magic, which is not great.
Fucking Mr. Krabs makes treasures. Hello?
So true. The other thing is just a 5/5 Flample Haste is realistically a Lava Axe with upside. It is almost impossible for your opponent to be in a position where they can answer this when it comes down before taking a hit.
So okay, the main issue I have with this card, I think if it is good, it's going to be good in the context of like people running Feasting Troll King and like the Asmarana Mardica Dice and Oculta decks. In Modern, you know, like the kind of like food dredge weird
Yeah.
hybrid stuff, where it's like you're not actually casting it ever, it's just kind of like this random free thing you get. I think it would have to be a similar thing here, because I would not be excited about casting this for 5 mana. So honestly, like I think we will probably eventually get to the point where we have enough cheap treasure making that you can theoretically make a deck that just always casts this for 0. But besides that, I don't know. I don't know if we're there right now, but treasures are now basically evergreen, so we're probably going to get a lot more of them. And eventually, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I also think something notable about this card, I feel like I'm broken record saying this, it's 5 mana. You can't Cursory Glance this, you can't Pith Wilt it.
Yeah.
And it was cast for free, so text and counter magic probably won't work.
Non-white decks will have a very hard time answering this, actually.
Especially if you are doing the Dork into Treasure Beach into casting this strat, you'll have an extra Dork that you can throw away to Exeunt or
Fucking Treasure Beach.
send on the Helpless.
I didn't realize it's a turn 2 angle. I didn't think about that. Alright. Yeah, this feels like kind of a meme right now, but maybe it'll be real eventually.
I also think it's the sort of meme that just kills you sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
All right. We're almost there. Let's get through the rest.
Power through. Okay. Next up we have the Grand Simurg. It is a Woodburg creature. 5 mana for a 5/5 flyer. When you cast it, you get to search your graveyard and the top 5 cards of your library for any number of non-legendary creature cards with total mana value 5 or less and put them into play. Then you shuffle. So does that regardless of whether or not it gets countered. means you can't blink it for the effect, but I still think that's worth. It's kind of a debate whether it's like worth running this over something like Maelstrom Elemental, or maybe your deck is like a World Heart Avatar deck and you actually want to run both those cards. I don't know.
The other thing to consider about this is the fact it can recur from your graveyard is pretty good.
Mhm.
Like
Actually, it might be a decent pod chain card. Am I crazy?
you have to
Oh,
cast
it's when you cast it. Okay, never mind. Shut up. Shut up, Dodger.
Oh no, this card's weird. I would be very excited about this card if we still had access to Leyland Alignment Field, but we super do not. So
Yeah, all right. It's like fine.
Yeah. All
But
right,
it's definitely okay.
let's get to Vini, High Truth Seeker. So 1 blue red for a 2/1 haste prowess. Also, whenever it's a replacement effect, but your non-creature spells double trigger abilities of permanents you control. We've seen this before. It's on that one Grixis card in Alara.
Yeah.
But A, this is redundancy, and B, it's a less restricted mana cost. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, probably about comparable. Like haste is nice, and the less restricted mana cost.
It's typed wizard, which is relevant.
Yeah, I don't know. It like seems like a fine card. Fun commander.
Next card is a very good sideboard option. Venture into the Muktan. 1 green white sorcery. Each player chooses an artifact and enchantment they control and sacrifices the rest. So it's bad at being removal for artifacts and enchantments, but a lot of the artifact decks we have in this format are density based, and so are a couple
they
of
go
the
really ham.
So
and it counts. It's not like one artifact and one enchantment. They get one.
Yeah. And if they are, for instance, replacing a bunch of their lands with rail lines, this is going to blow up a bunch of their lands or force them to keep their land and lose all of their other development.
This actually hates quite well against like one of the most popular decks right now, right?
Oh, it's also savage against Concord.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
because like even the new Idyllic Odyssey tokens are also enchantment creatures.
And at 3 mana, it's like 3 mana is so easy to cast.
Yeah.
Like sometimes Rot can feel a little slow, sometimes Singularity's Grasp can feel a little slow, and both those have the like downside of if your opponent has like an expensive artifact out, you're shit out of luck. But obviously this isn't good into Helm of Ulko, but this is going to take out all of their other stuff, even if they've invested like 4+ mana into a bunch of it.
Yeah.
The next card we have is all the way down the uncommons. We have Call of the Huma. I love this card. It's 1 and each Jeskai color. Instant. Return up to 1 target non-creature, non-land card from your graveyard to your hand. It deals 4 damage to any target. Exile it. So it's a 2-for-1, and that 2-for-1 is recurring you potentially another kill spell, another draw spell. So maybe even generating more. 4 damage is a lot of damage. Kills most creatures. It can really hurt a planeswalker, and also just like casting a couple of these puts your opponent very close to dying. Like a Jeskai counterburn deck, I think this makes that deck very close to being able to just straight up kill your opponent entirely through burn, which is exciting because then that means your win cons are also all answers. This card does exactly what you would want it to do. It just kills people and recurs.
I think the main question is like, is the 4 mana rate like enough for MSEM? Like, are there creatures that this kills that smaller removal spells don't? Is like one of the main factors as to whether I'd want it in the current meta, basically. But like, I think the rate is definitely good enough if it lines up well into the creatures that are being played. And like the ability to go face is always nice. Like, there's always that. So.
Okay. Next up, we have Fiery Truth Seeker. Essentially, Big Cane Dancer, Tigal. When did you get a red added to your cost, etc., etc. To 2 blue red flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If you do, exile it as it resolves. This seems like feel like there's so much you can do with this, and like I don't know, it like I can't like evaluate whether like this is going because I feel like this could either end up as like a really solid like mid-range or control piece, or it could just be like because it's 4 mana like a little too slow and just not end up making the cut. But it's so hard for me to evaluate before I see it in play. I don't know what y'all think.
That it
Um,
is too small, in my opinion.
One thing that I kind of like about this is it allows you to chain directly from 3 to 5 in pod decks if you care.
It's neat.
Because
Yeah.
this comes and immediately casts what lurks beyond sacrifices itself. Um, I don't know what that opens up, but it feels like it should open up something. Um, the other thing that I heard people talking about, which I kind of like, is playing this in Mabel decks. Then means you don't need to play. Being able to remove yourself from Cane Dancer suddenly changes your answer suite fundamentally, because now you aren't pressured to run a bunch of blue 2 cost cards. So you can run Out of Body Experience, you can run Journey's End or Event Horizon, you can run some 3 mana options, 3 mana draw spells, or the um, Jeskai card we were talking about earlier.
Hmm.
So it definitely, I think this is not an individually powerful card, but I think it's one that can influence deck building in a lot of subtle and powerful.
Okay, if you compare this to Goblin Dark Dwellers, like I think making it 1 mana cheaper and giving it flash is worth the -2/-2.
Um, yeah, I would also compare it to Bloodthirsty Adversary. I think is the one.
Kinda, yeah.
No?
I feel like that's a tougher conversation like comparison to make though, because like a big part of that card's power is like the 2 mana 2/2 mode.
That's true. But Bloodthirsty Adversary also is already showing up like
Mhm.
in much more powerful things than Dark Dwellers. Okay, so
Yeah.
Um, and the last one was a spice pick from me.
Oh wait,
Hold Captive is
yeah,
one
this
green
technically
white.
isn't the last card. There is the land.
Oh, sorry,
But
the
let's
last
look at it, right?
multicolored
With
platinum
yeah.
card. One green white enchantment. Enter the battle. It's an O-ring that also says when it enters, recruit. I think something that's noticeable about this card is if you flicker it. This is a answer that's also a win con, which is super powerful. I particularly like using it with Will of a Fickle Lord, because then you are proccing it every single turn. It's a little bit awkward if your opponent has cards with ETBs you're trying to answer, but also those aren't the sorts of things you want to answer with Oblivion Rings anyway. But yeah,
Did we already do the change where this can't target itself?
correct.
Okay, thank God.
That changed that stuff.
Yeah, because we don't want that. But yeah, I mean, I think like
I think
Pip's
the
point of
fact that we can't curve Writing Wonders into this and immediately win is a crime. This is very sad. Hashtag
yeah, I
free
mean, I
coal
think Pip's
mine.
point of like this being a good like flickerable answer for enchantment based decks is cool. And I mean, honestly, O-ring that comes with a 1/1 is like not that bad. That's like a decent amount of upside. Um, yeah, all right. Ooh, can I take the last card? I love this card.
Yeah, please do.
Hit it.
So the last card is Hidden Garden Entrance. And this card it's an Evolving Wilds on the front side. That's pretty much it. But it has a monument cost. And monument as a land on land is a bit weird, but like it works. So you get Cosmic Contraption, which is an artifact. The monument, I forgot to say, is 1 mana of each color. So Cosmic Contraption, when it enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, you get to reveal a non-creature card you own from outside the game and put it into your hand. So this is an Evolving Wilds at base, but if you ever get to 1 mana of each color, which there are plenty of MSEM decks people play that can do that, then bam, your land just got you a free wish from your sideboard, which obviously like that opens up a lot of possibilities for like maybe skimping down on actual win conditions in your 5-color control decks. I also just really love this card on a design level. I think Fabled Passage was just a huge game changer, and now I think strictly better Evolving Wilds are the future. Honestly, I think people should make more of them. I don't know. I think this is one of my favorite cards in the set for sure.
It's so fascinating to me because I've just seen so many different cards in this set that make me go, oh, okay, I now have a way I want to rebuild Heart Attack. And like that's literally just one deck, and there's like 4 or 5 different unique ways that this set introduced on how you can build that at minimum.
Yeah.
Uh, Hidden Garden Entrance is just like such a reasonable floor, and the upside is so huge. Like I think it is worth considering in your 3 color decks and just seeing if you can fit in 2 off-color tri-lands. It
But
just
I also think pay 1 mana, like pay Wooburg at sorcery speed is like such a reasonable cost that like it's not going to come every game at all, you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
So it doesn't feel overbearing, which is really cool to me. I like that a lot.
And the upside of this card is just huge. Like we've talked about the power of wishes. The fact that this thing can grab real. Okay, so one thing that I think is a little bit weak about this card in the grand scheme of things, um, is the fact that I'm pretty confident that the best thing, or more often than not, you're just going to grab a win con. I
Yeah.
don't think it usually makes sense to try and grab a specific answer. I think this is just you grab a win con. Because you're spending 5 mana Wooburg at sorcery speed. One particularly interesting answer you could grab, though, is either Singularity's Grasp or Rot. Because those, when you cast them, blow this up, which gives you another wish.
Uh,
That's actually really hype. Yeah. And those are also cards that just like make sense to exist in your sideboard.
yeah. Sweet. Very cool. Very cool.
Okay.
Are we done?
Yeah,
Is
we
that it?
are done.
All right.
I actually not gonna cap. I did not think we were gonna finish under 2 hours, but we made it. So congratulations,
Hell yeah.
us. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching. In the description, we'll be linking the Planesculptors Instigator page, so you can see the full visual spoiler for this set. Definitely check it out. There are way more cards that are spicy and exciting than we were able to fit into just this 2 hour stretch. So we hope you'll check that out in full.
Like there's a whole command cycle. There's tons of multicolor rares. There's like a whole type of land that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, the whole satrapies, satrapies. I think I don't know, but yeah, and yeah. Other than that, we'll be reviewing the other set that got into MSEM this season, Beyond Arcane, next week. But until then, thanks for watching, and see you later.